Thanks for listening to the Wayback Chronicles podcast. My name is Noel Kurst, and I'm joined by my lifelong friends, Keith Abbott and Steve McKelkey. On this podcast, we look at the greatest events that have happened since 1970 to the present.
As you recall, the Wayback Time Machine took us back to 1995. And in this episode, Keith is going to take us through the world of sports. And those of you that don't know Keith very well, Keith likes sports, but you wouldn't describe him
not like you like him.
Yeah. I mean,
like
he's
Steve.
not the aficionado. I mean, we have better experts like, I barely made it through the technology episode.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so this should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to hearing what Keith has to share from 1995 World of Sports. So Keith, take it away.
Okay. And it's kind of fun. I love the fact that we're getting out of our comfort zones a little bit because
yes, we are.
Yes, I like sports. I don't have like the book of the almanac of history, but it's fun to go back and remember some of these events and go, man, let's dig deeper with these. So, and I'll tell you, the sports of 1995, if there was a year where it probably needed meds, this was probably it, because there were some of the highest times in sports and there were some of the lowest times in sports. And so that's where I'm going to start, because the sports of 1995 really kind of began with a whimper. So there were basically two major areas in the sporting world that started in 1995, either with a lockout or with a strike.
Oh.
And so let's start first and foremost with hockey. So the NHL season, there was a lockout of the players by the owners, and it was a shortened season that happened. And it was basically a subject of a dispute, as in they were trying to create a salary cap, which always seems to be the reason for strikes, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, they shortened the season length from 84 games to 48. So literally almost cut it in half,
Goodness.
And so, so the season basically started from January 20th to May 3rd. So it usually starts in the late winter of the year before, but it started in January this year. Is actually the first time in NHL history that the regular season ended in May. In all, the shortened season ended with the New Jersey Devils sweeping the heavily favored Detroit Red Wings for their first Stanley Cup win.
They swept them?
Yeah, swept them.
Detroit was the favorite, and then they got swept. Wow.
Yep, absolutely. And it was actually New Jersey Devils' first appearance in the finals, too, overall. Wow. But kind of interesting other notable events for that year. So this was the first year that every arena had required 2 Zambonis to resurface between periods instead of 1. So that's fun. This was also the last year that Quebec Nordiques would play in Quebec before becoming the Colorado Avalanche. Right?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And basically the Art Ross Trophy for most goals in the regular season was Jaromir Jagr of the Pittsburgh Penguins with 32. So it was a crazy year because it was abridged, but just they finally got to kind of get through it. But it was kind of it was kind of the tip of the iceberg for people having a little bit of disgruntlement in the world of sports for this year.
I just wanted to point out how fun it is to say the word Zamboni.
Isn't it great? I know.
I don't know who made that word up, but it had to have been made up sometime in the past. And I just want to take this moment to recognize how great the word Zamboni is.
I feel like it should go in Italian. Zamboni,
Zamboni. What would you like to eat tonight? Do you want a pizza, a calzone, or a Zamboni?
Why do we need the pizza? We need the Zamboni.
Zamboni with extra cheese.
Jaromir Jagr is really fun to say as well. Hey, bartender, give me a round of Jaromir Jagr, please.
I know, like I want a Jaromir Jagr shot.
Yeah. Or when he goes to Starbucks, can you imagine them calling out it? Jaromir Jagr.
Your peppermint mocha's here.
Yeah. Something tells me somebody named Jaromir Jagr is not drinking a peppermint.
He's gonna be like, I had coffee with vodka. No,
black coffee.
Yes, extra tar. Yep. So anyway, and on the college side of hockey, Boston University won the national championship that season. They had a 12-game single elimination championship series that culminated on April 1st of that year. So I'm trying to do a lot of sports. Sports is weird, like some other things where some of it bleeds over from the previous year and extends into the following. So on the college side of things, we're kind of looking at the end of the school year for 95, the May of 95. So they defeated Maine 6-2 on April 1st. So then obviously there was a year that continued, but I figure if the time machine gets us to 96, we can talk about that next. So, but that was what I had in the world of hockey. So what I thought we'd do next is kind of go to the world of basketball. Is that my dog or y'all's dog?
It's not my dog.
It's absolutely my dog. That's great. Okay. Yeah, nice. Shadow, could you scratch your privates elsewhere? We got things. Okay. All right. So here we are going to enjoy this next segment, right? So in basketball, the Houston Rockets
Oh, yes.
became the lowest seeded team to ever win the NBA Finals. They won as the 6th seed in the Western Conference. They also became the first team to defeat 4 opponents who had 50 or more wins en route to a title. So they beat Utah Jazz. Go Jazz! It's a
Jazz.
totally inside story. Anyway, Phoenix, San Antonio, and Orlando. So the only other team ever to accomplish that feat was in 2000 and 2001 by the Lakers.
Wow.
So they also became the first repeat champion in history to keep the title with a sweep. In addition, the Rockets became the first team in NBA history to win the title without having home court advantage in any of the 4 playoff rounds since the playoffs were expanded to a 16-team format in 84.
Wow.
So pretty interesting. But here's what's interesting about it too. Coincidence, right? So there's a lot of weird things that happened in this year. The feat was also achieved by who? The New Jersey Devils in the same year when they won the Stanley Cup. They were the only team, the first team in history to have that happen in the hockey side. Kind of interesting, right?
That is interesting.
So who did the Rockets beat in the for NBA championship? Do you have that?
Versus the Magic. Orlando Magic.
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
So the 1995 playoff leaders in points, Hakeem Olajuwon, total rebounds, Shaquille O'Neal, assists, Anthony Hardaway, and what is WS? What is that? What would that be?
World Series. They won the World Series.
Well,
too.
Shaquille O'Neal also won the World Series, but anyway, so that's
wow.
Yeah. So and Hakeem Olajuwon was the MVP.
Okay.
For the finals. So there you go. So
wide shots like that you missed the rim. They call it a wide shot. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe so. Maybe. Well, if it was Shaquille O'Neal, it definitely wasn't free throws, right?
That's right.
So anyway, but other notable things that happened with the basketball season late in the season. Michael Jordan returned to the Chicago Bulls after an attempt at minor league baseball career, which we'll talk about baseball and that cluster that happened this year in a second. So his announcement consisted of a 2-word fax saying, "I'm back." Right. And so because the Bulls had already retired his number 23, he returned wearing what number? Do y'all remember?
45.
45. That's right. Right. Yeah. And then during the playoffs, though, he changed back to number 23. So, and here you go, Steve. Here's another thing that I thought you could appreciate. The also notable event of that year, an era came to an end as the Boston Celtics played their final season at the historic Boston Garden.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Yeah, man.
So interesting thing about number 45 for Jordan. So after Jordan left the Bulls and played for what was, I guess, the Washington Wizards at the time, he went back to number 45. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Is this why you should be doing this episode? That's pretty good.
You're doing great.
Yeah, thanks. So far, it's not painful, right? So, so we'll turn to college. The championship game in college saw UCLA win their 11th national championship and their first and only title under Jim Herrick by defeating Arkansas 89-78. And that foiled the Razorbacks' chances of having back-to-back national titles as they'd won it the year before.
Wow, right.
And then women's college basketball, UConn defeated Tennessee 70-64, and that was its first NCAA title, and that's a pretty big dynasty now, right?
Yeah,
and it actually completed a 35 win and no loss undefeated season that year. So pretty impressive for UConn too. And I'll get to another notable thing about UConn a little bit later in this episode, but pretty good stuff. So really tennis, just briefly, the main leaders, the main winners in tennis, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, and Steffi Graf pretty much dominated all of the tennis in the world. Compared to Andre Agassi won the Australian Open. Pete Sampras and Steffi Graf, just carried most championships that year. So a really good year for all three of those players. So
I wonder if Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf are still married.
Man, he was like Mr. Reebok back in the day. He had like the long flowing hair and everything.
He was kind of the one that introduced all of the neon colors in the late 80s.
Yes.
Didn't he? So,
yeah. He was a force to be reckoned with back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do wonder where is he at today? It's interesting.
I don't know. So, So Steffi Graf, he's been married to her since 2001. Who was he married to before Steffi Graf? Here's a little trivia for you. He was married from 97 to 99 to another famous person.
Was it Brooke Shields?
Yes, it was.
Really?
Yeah.
See, you can't even get tennis around Steve. This is ridiculous.
Golly.
Unreal.
I surprise myself sometimes.
I'm proud of you. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
And for the listeners' benefit, this is legit. Like, we didn't rehearse this or anything like that.
Yeah.
This is the first time we're having this conversation. The first time
This is Steve at his prime right here.
Steve took his whatever he took his Flintstone vitamins this morning, and now he's clicking on all cylinders.
So let's go ahead and transition to the cluster that was baseball in 1995.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So it was another strike-ridden sport that occurred, or at least spilled over into the 1995 season. So it was actually the first season to be played under an expanded postseason format. And it's because the League Division Series was played in both the American and National Leagues for the first time. Here's the problem, though. There was a 1994 strike that happened again because of salary caps. And literally, guys, there could be an entire episode on this because there's so much. I mean, I think it's important, though, that although this is about 1995, we discuss a little bit about what happened the previous year, because the strike actually began way back on August 12th of 94. And what that did is it resulted in the remainder of that season, including the postseason and the World Series, being canceled. It was the first time in 90 years since 1904 that a World Series wasn't played. So it ended up going 232 days and was finally suspended on April 2nd of 95. So it was the longest such stoppage in Major League Baseball history and the longest work stoppage in Major League professional sports at the time.
Yeah, 1994, the season 1994 was when the Montreal Expos were like banging. Like they were on their way to like a big postseason push, and that the end of that season really affected them, and that actually began the downward spiral of that franchise. They started
100%.
selling off all their best players. Attendance and interest in the team declined. They pretty much they disbanded.
Oh yeah.
And now they're the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, believe it or not, through that whole Major League Baseball strike, a total of 948 games were canceled.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy?
That is nuts.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was the first ever American professional sports in history to lose an entire postseason due to a labor strike.
Yeah. I remember a lot of the country was really upset with the players in the league, and
yeah, I remember that.
Like you were saying, Steve, during the first days of the 95 seasons, people were pretty hacked off, right? Attendance at games plummeted. In fact, there was close to a 20% decline in attendance at games this year versus the previous year. The fans that showed up demonstrated a lot of frustrations. Here's a couple of them that I found. So 3 men wearing T-shirts emblazoned with greed leapt onto the field at Shea Stadium to a standing ovation and tossed $160 and $1 bills at the players' feet before being restrained, right? In Cincinnati, one fan paid for a plane to fly over Riverfront Stadium that carried a banner reading, "Owners and players, to hell with all of you." Wow. Fans in Pittsburgh disrupted the opening day game between the Expos and the Pirates by throwing various objects on the field, causing a 17-minute delay before being warned that the game would be declared a forfeit to the Expos, but they continued to boot anyway. It didn't matter. And then in Detroit, Detroit fans booed and hurled beer bottles, cans, baseballs, cigarette lighters, and a hubcap onto the field, causing a 12-minute delay, holding up signs saying "Field of" with dreams scratched out and then greed next to it, and strike, owners with a dollar sign for the S win, players with a dollar sign win, and fans lose, right?
Oh my goodness, man.
Yeah,
fans were throwing a fit.
Yeah, they were mad. Yeah, the last one was during the game at Yankee Stadium, which was the opening game for the Yankees versus the Rangers. Somebody held up a sign saying "Shame on you" with a dollar sign for the S, and then the commissioner for the baseball team fair responded by flipping off the fan. Right, so awesome grace. Right, so crazy, and the opening games were also played with replacement umpires. They couldn't even get the umpires to work there. So pretty crazy stuff. But not all was negative though. So the Braves, they were the big winners in this World Series. They took the first 2 at home versus Cleveland. During the 3 games then after at Jacobs Field, the Indians won games 3 and 5, but those games sandwiched around the Braves 5-2 game 4 victory, right? And then in game 6, the Braves, on the power of an 8-inning one-hitter thrown by Tom Glavine and David Justice hitting a solo home run, won the game 1-0 and won the World Series. And so, an interesting fact about this became the Braves the first team to win a World Series in 3 home cities. What were the 3 home cities that the Braves were part of? Do you know? I didn't know this, so it was interesting.
3 home cities.
Yeah, so they were in 3 different locations, not just Atlanta. There were 2 other places. So Atlanta obviously was one.
Yeah,
they won in another city in 1914 and in another city in 1957.
I'm going to say, were they originally in Kansas City at one point?
No. Up kind of in Celtic country. Does that help?
Oh, really? It'll be a total guess.
So with Celtic country, I'm helping you out, man.
Boston.
There you go. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm embarrassed to say that because that should have been Steve's answer right there.
Like I was like, and there you go. No.
I was like New Hampshire.
Rhymes with Austin.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
B. Think more B than an A.
More B than an A. Yeah. And then Milwaukee in 1957. So that's pretty interesting there.
Milwaukee.
So yeah, other notable events. This was the year that Coors Field opened. And Cal Ripken Jr. of the Orioles played his 2,131st consecutive Major League game to surpass Lou Gehrig.
Wow.
And then in hires, Tony La Russa was hired by the Cardinals, and Joe Torre was hired as the Yankees as their respective managers. So pretty interesting stuff. So a lot of good stuff. And this was the 4th consecutive Cy Young Award for Greg Maddux, which is freaking legend. Yeah. If you ever hear the stats on him, it's insane. It's crazy. Oh, yeah. So anyway, so that was all on the baseball. Switching just to college baseball briefly, it was really the World Series ended up with a battle of the Californias where USC and Cal State Fullerton were battling for the final, and Cal State Fullerton went on to win the College World Series. And it was the 3rd title for guess which coach?
Augie Garrido.
You are correct. So pretty crazy, right?
So when we covered 84, I know Noel's shaking his head, but Augie Garrido was still a coach at Cal State Fullerton. So.
Yeah, we have covered some really great names tonight. Augie Garrido.
I know. Up
like,
there with you. Hey, Augie, could you get me a Yager?
Augie, get me a Yager.
It sounds like
I'll get you a Zamboni too.
That's right. Hey. Pretty good stuff. So just briefly switching over to golf, the Masters was won by Ben Crenshaw. The PGA money leader for that year was Greg Norman. And in the amateur, this was the 2nd of 3 victories for one amateur golfer of note. Could you name who that might be?
Tiger Woods.
There you go. Hey. There you go. Yeah. So he was still an amateur at that point, and but quickly rising to prominence at that time.
Was it 96 or 97 that he won his first pro championship? I think it was 97.
Was that when he won the Masters? And
yeah.
And then there was a whole Fuzzy Zeller.
Yeah,
I think
inappropriate comments.
I forgot about the Fuzzy Zeller thing.
I did too. Interesting. So did I tell you that was my claim to fame? Was I met Tiger Woods? Did I ever tell you about this?
In a hotel lobby, right? Or something like
yes.
that?
Yeah. It was the dumbest thing. It's a typical Keith move. Let me just put it this way. So I'm recruiting. I'm doing, I think it was when I was working on my master's degree. So it must have been 96, probably right after this and right before he started becoming really, really, really popular. But I think it was his first year as a pro. But anyway, so I'm at this checkout in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm sitting there checking out of the hotel, and there's this guy next to me, tall guy, pretty well built dude, right? You can tell he's an athlete. So I just start cutting up, talking to him a little bit. Hey, what's going on? How's it going? He's real friendly talking to me. I'm like, what'd you do? He's like, oh man, just had a golf tournament here. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. How'd it go? He goes, it was all right. I'm like, I know better things to come. I'm sure, man. Just think positive. I mean, just crazy alternating conversations with this dude.
Oh, Keith.
And I mean, at the end, I'm like, hey man, good luck. Nice to talk to you. I shake his hand and I walk away. Right. So I'm walking away, and this is no joke. Right. So I'm with the Dean of Students office at Tech. Right. The Dean of Students is behind me with his jaw open, like hitting the floor. Like he's like, do you know who that was? And I'm like, no. He was like, dude, that was Tiger Woods. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Who's that? I had no idea. No idea. And so like all I see is he's chasing him down the hall. Hey, Tiger, how about an autograph? And all this stuff. And all I can say is maybe he just enjoyed the fact that he was an anonymous person for a moment,
I bet so.
Because we had he was a cool dude. We had a great conversation about nothing. Right. So you never know.
I think I heard a podcast once that Tiger Woods was given where he was talking about the time he met Keith Abbott in
there it is.
the hotel lobby
that was
in
it.
San Antonio. So now we've heard your side of the story.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And his. We need to hang out more, Keith, because you like run into famous people.
But I don't know them. Like
Night. Well, you saw Night Ranger at the Chicago airport.
I didn't know it was them either. Right.
Yeah,
somebody had to go, dude, that is. I'm like, you're lying. Yeah. So I don't know. Who knows who else I don't even know. So anyway, but it was a fun little moment there. So that was a total tangent. So anyway,
that's cool.
So let's switch gears to football. So the NFL season in 95. And so what I'm doing on the NFL season is obviously these are another bleed over. So we're going to do the fall leading into the 96 Super Bowl that was for the 95 season is where I'm going. Okay. So it was a 76 regular season. This was the year that the league expanded to 30 teams. They added 2. Who were they?
So Carolina Panthers,
Carolina, Jacksonville.
Jaguars.
And I can say that whoever was the artist for their helmets was the most boring man in history because they look exactly the same.
They do.
Anyway, sorry, I'm fine. So
they got 2-for-1 discount.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, other things of note about the NFL season. This was actually Miami Dolphins head coach Don Shula's last season. There you go. Super Bowl 30. Triple X, right, was an American football game between the Who and the Who. Can you remember this? And let me give you a hint, Steve. This was the year of our Super Bowl party at the Omnia.
One's definitely the Green Bay Packers.
Wrong.
No?
This was the bigger Super Bowl party. This was the one in Lubbock. This was the Lubbock 4-apartment wide Super Bowl party.
Cowboys versus Buffalo.
The Cowboys versus the Steelers, because remember that was when Bam Morris was the Steeler. And we had this cookie tray, and all the cookies had the Dallas Cowboy icing except the one in the middle that was our tribute to Bam Morris from him being in Tech. Remember that? So anyway, but that was who it was. So both teams entered the game trying to tie the San Francisco 49ers for the record for the most Super Bowl wins by a franchise. So here's interesting. Tempe was originally chosen as the venue for Super Bowl 27, but the NFL pulled the game away from Arizona after the league joined a massive boycott for tourism by various groups to protest the state's refusal to recognize Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So they finally instated this back to Arizona for this national championship year after in 1992, they finally made it a federal holiday. So that's interesting. But this Super Bowl was the last to be hosted in a stadium containing bleacher seats and was also the last to be held in a college campus, because it was the Arizona State University Sundale level stadium. So pretty interesting. And also it was the last Super Bowl to have a team wear jerseys that had screen printed numbers. The Cowboys wore screen printed numbers that year. So interesting. So anyway, but long story short, it was the third meeting between these two longtime rivals in a Super Bowl. It was the most between any two NFL teams, and Dallas became the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. And basically the Pittsburgh Steelers defeat was their first Super Bowl loss in the team's history, which was interesting. So they defeated them by the score of 21-17. And that was their 5th Super Bowl in team history. And actually, believe it or not, as of now, the last one that they won. Yeah. So we're all in, Steve, you being in the Dallas area, they're hoping a drought will end someday, right?
1995.
The boys are back. That's what I hear.
Yeah, so that's kind of what they keep telling us, isn't it? Yeah. So
they're going to get there. They're going to get there before the Houston Texans get there. I can tell you that for sure.
That's probably true. So,
I think the 3 of us could probably put together a team and get there before the Texans get there.
I mean, I've seen my fantasy football. Please do not get my recommendations. Just saying. So, it probably would not work out well for you. But so here's an interesting note: the television broadcast of the Super Bowl broke the then record for the most watched sporting event ever. And it was the second most watched program of all time at that point, behind what? What was the most watched TV show of all time? Still, I mean, up until now.
The most watched TV show?
Mm-hmm. There's one final episode of a show that was the most watched. No, it was the most watched TV show in history, and still holds the record other than
MASH.
Sporting events. MASH, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
MASH.
right. So this also was the year that four-time Super Bowl champion quarterback Joe Montana announced his retirement. And as you recall, he spent the last 2 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yep.
So, and
that shouldn't have happened.
I know that just, it
he
was
should have retired a 49er.
It's like Emmitt Smith going to play Arizona.
Completely. It's kind of like Brett Favre going to Minnesota, right? Same idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which incidentally, Brett Favre was the MVP of that year for Green Bay.
Yeah.
So, and Ray Rhodes of the Philadelphia Eagles was the coach of the year. So
Brett Favre.
Brett Favre. And here's an interesting thing for Texas folks. So Dallas's Larry Brown, who was a TCU alum and a 12th round, believe it or not, 12th round draft pick, became the first cornerback to be named a Super Bowl MVP by recording 2 interceptions the second half. So that's interesting there too.
It is.
In college football, the preseason favorite for that year was Florida State. But Tom Osborne in Nebraska got its second straight title with a victory over Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. So it was only possible actually because of the new Bowl Alliance. So this was the year that the Bowl Alliance started. So under the old system, Nebraska would have actually been tied to the Orange Bowl and Florida to the Sugar Bowl. So the Bowl Alliance actually created a national championship game that would rotate between the Orange, Sugar, and Fiesta Bowls. And it was kind of free of conference tie-ins and featuring the number 1 and number 2 teams chosen by the Bowl Alliance poll. So interestingly enough, the Pac-10 and the Big Ten chose not to participate. So there's something interesting. It kind of created a little controversy because Ohio State going into its final regular season game against Michigan, they were still undefeated and ranked number 2. So had they finished number 2 in that Bowl Alliance, whole thing would have been blown up. But fortunately, Michigan upset Ohio State. So truly that national championship game was between number 1 and number 2. But that being said, the Ohio State running back, Eddie George, was the one who won the Heisman Trophy for that year. Anyway, that's kind of where it is in the season of sports. But pretty interesting stuff. And here's another little thing that's kind of interesting. The Southwest Conference, of which is we're familiar with. It played its final game ever in football that year, an 18-17 Houston win over Rice. And then it would go on to be split up between the Big 8 to join the Big 12 and others between the WAC and the newly formed Conference USA. So
we were there for the first Big 12 game.
Yep, yes, we were. Do you remember who the teams were?
Manhattan, Kansas against Kansas State and Texas Tech.
That's right. That's right.
In the stands. That was awesome.
That was, I'll never forget that. That was that was like a very rough game, if I remember.
It was.
Yeah, we lost,
it was.
Right?
Well, we should have won, but yeah,
that was.
There was a touchdown. I think it was Donnie Hart. Corner of the end zone. Not called a touchdown, but it was definitely a touchdown.
Definitely a touchdown. Yeah, we should have won that game.
We were in the parking lot leaving in the band bus, and one of the Kansas State fans, probably very drunk, flashed the bus.
Oh, really?
Yes, and forever, I will. Every time I think of Kansas State, Manhattan, I always think about that incident. Like,
that's hilarious.
Just in a blink of an eye, like your reputation forever tainted by that.
Right. that makes me think of USC and the middle finger glove.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. You got to tell the story, man. You've already opened that.
Okay,
Steve, tell it.
Yeah, you got to. The person who dealt it has to tell it. So
I mean, what year did we play USC in Cotton Bowl? Was it 95?
95.
I think it was this year.
An appropriate story, yeah.
End of the 94 season, yeah. So we played in 95, January 2nd.
So we found that USC, we knew USC had a sort of a reputation for being a tough team to face, and their fans were tough, and they were just, part of my French, total bastards the entire experience with them. And you know, this whole game was highlighted by, Keyshawn Johnson basically making every single receiving record possible at the Cotton Bowl against Tech, and long game, and we just had enough. And so
I think Tech won the coin toss.
We did. There was that.
And that was the last victory of the and the halftime. We won halftime, but that's it. And gee whiz.
So a little frustration. And so, of course, we were all in the band, and part of our band uniform was wearing these white gloves. And so at me and a good buddy, Tim Stewart, we were bandwagon drivers, which is the equipment band that kept all the band's equipment in. And we were driving down the stadium, and Tim was like, God, my last game, I got a hole in my glove, and he was about to just toss it away. I was like, hold on a second, I got an idea. back then, the old vans had radio antennas hanging off the side, and so I laid the glove over the antenna where it was given the middle finger gesture, and as we
it
drove
was an
by,
accident. It just happened to be placed that way, I'm sure.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
no, totally
It's
intentional.
it's the tallest finger on the hand. So
Yeah, it fits best.
Totally intentional,
naturally.
hoping we didn't get caught. And so we drove by all the USC buses, and the antennas giving the middle finger to all the US teams, and then of course we drive by all the Tech buses, and everybody's like, cheering, and
Oh,
it was like the last
The
word, and
moral victory.
we finally get to
we needed something to be happy and cheering about.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so we get past the line of buses, and our band director is standing there at the end. I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have done this. And he sees and just busts up laughing. And so I knew we were good.
I also remember that was the night where we had heard that they also like to break into. There's I don't know if it's fact or not, so I don't want to call anybody out, but there was a word on the street that they would try to break into things. You were with me on this, Noel, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
So there were some of the guys would be spending the nights in the evenings awake and kind of holding shifts to make sure we were monitoring our equipment trucks. Yep. And we got in good with the
police car.
The police cars. Where did we stay? Was it up in Addison? Who was the police?
Addison. It was
Addison, wasn't it? Somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, we got in pretty good with the guys. So after a while, we got so bored that they were like, "Okay,
It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning."
Yeah, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Nothing's obviously happening. Yeah. So we're like, "Okay, what do we do?" So we convinced the police to either give us the radar guns or do it themselves. But they started timing how fast we could run, right?
Which wasn't very fast.
It was bad, but that was hilarious, man. That was some fun. As brutal as that game was, that's probably my favorite bowl memory of all of them. So.
That trip was awesome. We were there for New Year's Day on January 1st, 95.
It was crazy.
All expenses paid trip to Dallas with all your best friends. I mean, it was just the best.
It was a blast. Isn't that fun. The year also they had like we went to didn't we go to Reunion Arena to watch the fireworks? And I mean, there was like, and we went to Spaghetti Warehouse to eat. All sorts of crazy stuff.
There was a pep rally by Reunion Arena.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it was. I remember that now. So pretty crazy.
So the other highlight from that game is, I guess it was maybe right before halftime. Can't remember exactly where it was in the day, but a couple USC band members are trying to steal the gun prop from Raider Red's costume. And of course, the guy that was in costume, he was a bad dude. And
yes, he was.
Wasn't he a former Marine or something? Wasn't he?
Yeah.
It wasn't happening.
Yeah. And so next thing you know, Raider Reds, punching the lights out, some USC band members, and the Tech crowd's going nuts. And
that was right before we went out in March.
Yeah.
We were waiting on the sidelines.
Yeah, we were on the sidelines. I remember that.
So a couple moral victories on that day.
Yeah. And all in 95. So this is all appropriate.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. It happened in 95. We're still within the bounds of the old podcast here.
That's right. So wrapping it up, the male and female athletes of the year. So male athlete of the year, Cal Ripken Jr., Major League Baseball.
Wow.
The female athlete of the year was kind of a surprise, but definitely a rewarded one. It was Rebecca Lobo of UConn. So a female player of the year was a college basketball player. So pretty cool. And then that kind of paved the way between her and Cheryl Swoops from the year before. Or 2 years before to kind of start the WNBA up. So pretty neat that they had some good, forays into the women's sports and women's athletic there, as well as all of the accomplishments that some of the other sports did. So pretty neat.
Nice, man.
So that's my wrap up of 1995 in sports. And it was a good year. It was a crazy year.
Yeah, for sure.
Wayback Chronicles research department really did you a good job. Did you some good work there, Keith? You got some good stuff, man.
Thank goodness for the internet. All I can say. If this would have been done in 1995, I would have been so out of luck. But
you've been going through encyclopedias and stuff.
That's right. I love it. Yeah, right. Pull off the dust. Wait, this is 93. Dang it. Pretty good stuff. So.
What a year.
Yeah, it was a good year. I mean, so yeah, we've covered current events, we've covered sports, we've covered technology, but we'd be remiss not to cover things like movies, music. I mean, you alluded to it, Noel. Friends was big during that time. If we don't talk about TV, we're going to be really missing out on some things. Yeah. So,
absolutely,
so definitely a mashup to come after this episode.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Very cool.
So with that in mind, nice job, Keith, for taking us through the year of 1995 in sports. We'll see all of you on our next episode of the Wayback Chronicles when we start our mashup. We'll find out what we talk about. Will it be movies, or will it be music, or will it be TV, or will it be other stuff? So everybody have a great time. Yeah. And we'll see you way back soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wayback Chronicles. All shows are written and produced by Noel, Keith, and Steve. Massive thanks to those who made these memories possible for us through the years. All songs, sounds, and effects have been attributed in the comments section and through links listed on waybackchronicles.podbean.com. We look forward to taking you way back again in the very near future.